Hello, 大家好, 大家好. I'm very happy and very honored that I can present some ideas at this year's 加台会. I'm going to speak in English today because I hope that you share what I have to say with younger people who may not be born in Taiwan or speak Chinese, and also with friends. The title of my talk will be Promoting Canada-Taiwan Relations, the crucial role of citizen involvement. I am Professor Scott Simon at the University of Ottawa Faculty of Social Sciences. My name in Chinese is史国良, and I even have a Telugu name, an indigenous name from Taiwan, which is Wadan. So today, first of all, I'm going to give a little bit of a brief introduction. I did want to start out by saying very briefly that I want to recognize that we are on Indigenous land. I'm in Western Quebec as I'm recording this, so I'm on the land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. But I think wherever we are, whether it's Montreal or Toronto or Vancouver or Taipei, that we recognize that the land we're on was nourished because of the Indigenous people who lived there and took care of that land for thousands of years before we arrived here. I have been working basically for most of my adult life thinking about Taiwan. I did my bachelor degree in East Asian Studies. I then went to do my master's degree and my PhD in anthropology at McGill University in Montreal. I did my fieldwork in Tainan for my PhD from 1996 to 1998. I then lived in Kaohsiung for 1 year, and then I worked at Academia Sinica in Taipei, where I did fieldwork with women entrepreneurs in Taipei from 1999 to 2001. Since 2001, I've been working at the University of Ottawa, but I have always spent my career trying to create relations between the University of Ottawa and Taiwan. I thus got grants from the federal government. I did 3 years of field work with indigenous Sejek and Durugu people in Nantou and Hualien. I've been a visiting professor at the University of Taitung and also at Pingke Da in Pingtung. I've taken 3 groups of U of Ottawa students to Donghua University in Hualien for study tours. I've been very busy with language training. I have mastered 2 Taiwanese languages, 因为我会讲国语，也会讲日文, because Japanese is also a language spoken in Taiwan. 我讲台语不是很好. And then, of course, there's Telugu, which I speak a bit of. This year, I unexpectedly spent 4 months in Tainan, and I've been writing about Taiwan an awful lot, mostly in anthropology. I've written 4 books. The last one is going through the process of publication. And with increasing frequency, I'm writing about politics. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm also a research member of the University of Ottawa's Human Rights Research and Education Center and the Center for International Policy Studies. So basically what I want to talk about today is that we are living in very dangerous times. Actually, China, ever since 1949, has been promising to take Taiwan. But on January 2nd, 2019, Xi Jinping expressed his will to annex Taiwan in his second message to the compatriots of Taiwan. He said, I think probably the most important and most dangerous thing he said was, we do not renounce the use of force and we reserve the option of taking all necessary measures. He was basically saying that the Taiwanese government has to come to the negotiating table ready to unify with China. President Tsai Ing-wen, of course, rejected this immediately. But I think that what's quite interesting is that on January 17th, the members of Taiwan's Indigenous, Historical Justice, and Transitional Justice Committee responded that the national future of Taiwan will be decided by self-determination of the Taiwanese indigenous peoples and all the people who live on our motherland. And so the Taiwanese indigenous people are trying to think of a way in which they can have recognition of their sovereignty and then create a new Taiwan together with all people who live on Taiwan. Now, China doesn't take to this very well. Since 2016 in December, they've sent their Air Force to circle with their jet fighters around Taiwan 15 times. Just this year, they've done an awful lot. I've written an article about that. Chinese jet fighters entered Taiwan's southwestern airspace 9 times in June 2020 alone, plus 1 approach towards Taiwan via Japan's Miyako Strait. And of course, Taiwanese jets take off and chase them away right away. In July, there were 5 incursions, including 2 at night, which show how seriously they take things. On August 10th, Chinese air fighters crossed the median line. I'm not sure how many actually crossed the line, at least 1, but this was timed so that it happened precisely at the moment that U.S. Health Secretary Alex Azar was meeting with President Tsai. So that really is a signal of their intentions to take Taiwan. So in the article I wrote, and here I've got the link for you, I started out by saying in his novel, The Plague, Albert Camus wrote, "There have always been as many plagues as wars in history, yet plagues and wars always take people equally by surprise." And this is something that I really highlight when I speak to Canadians, with people in the Canadian government, and I think that all of us should be doing. We must remind those around us that Asia is not some distant place on the other side of the world. We should keep in mind that just the contrary, Tokyo, for example, is only a 10-hour flight from Vancouver. That means that plagues and wars that occur in Asia or start in Asia affect the security, the prosperity, and the lives of all Canadians. Taiwan is important in itself. In fact, I'm working on an article right now with political scientist André Laliberté on this very topic. Taiwan has a territory that's larger than Belgium. It has a population similar to Australia, so we really should take Taiwan as seriously as we take Belgium and Australia. Taiwan ranks 22nd in the world in terms of GDP, and in terms of spending power, GDP per capita in PPP, Taiwan is actually wealthier than Canada. Our countries are very well connected. There are about 60,000 Canadians living in Taiwan, making Taiwan home to the 4th largest Canadian diaspora community in the world, and there are about 200,000 Taiwanese in Canada. In 2017, Taiwan was our 14th largest source of international students. That's far overshadowed by the number of students from China, but I think we should remind our university administrators that if there's a war in the Taiwan Straits, we won't get those Chinese students either. Taiwan is also at the center of the world's semiconductor industry. This conference would not be possible if our computers and cell phones were not made with semiconductors from Taiwan. So, anyway, I've been thinking through some of the ways in which Taiwan is important to Canada. Economically, and these are some information from the Global Affairs fact sheet online, Taiwan is Canada's 13th largest trading partner and the 15th largest in Asia. Total merchandise trade with Taiwan in 2018 was $7.87 billion, with Canadian exports to Taiwan in the other direction at $2 billion, and imports from Taiwan at $5.9 billion. There are certain priority sectors for Canada. Those would be aerospace, information and communications technology, agri-food and seafood products, biotechnology, clean technologies, and energy. So it's a very important commercial relationship we have. Canada and Taiwan share democratic values. We can see that in all of the parties. The Liberal Party of Canada and the DPP are both members of Liberal International. The Conservative Party and the KMT are both members of the International Democrat Union. We have what's called the Canada-Taiwan Interparliamentary Friendship Group, and in fact, it's one of the most active interparliamentary groups in Ottawa. They have activities on the Hill. They inform parliamentarians about Taiwan, and sometimes there's travel of MPs going from Ottawa to Taipei or from Taipei to Ottawa. I'm very happy every time I see this going on. In fact, I work with Indigenous people. I get to meet Kong Wenji, who is from Atayal Sajek Dorogo people, and he has a very close relationship with certain people in our parliament. And I'm happy to see those relations prosper. Both Canada and Taiwan are leaders in human rights issues, and I'm thinking specifically about same-sex marriage as LGBTQ2S plus rights. And I'm also thinking about efforts that are made towards Indigenous truth and reconciliation, in which Canada and Taiwan are also learning from one another, although, of course, Taiwan is learning more from Canada than the other way. I hope that we are working towards recognizing the right of self-determination as a fundamental human right that belongs to all groups of people who come together to form a nation. I always think it's unfair that the Quebecers, who are a very integral part of Canada from the beginning, have this right recognized and that they're allowed to have referendums. And Canada says they will negotiate in good faith if they were to decide to separate from Canada. But Taiwan, which has never been part of the People's Republic of China, doesn't seem to have that same right. And I think that we really need to work towards assuring that the people of Taiwan have the right of self-determination and that they can exercise that right someday. In terms of security issues, Taiwan is a very important partner in the Pacific. Nowadays, Japan, the United States, Australia, India are referring to the free and open Indo-Pacific. And they're trying to bring together a group of like-minded countries that can collaborate on security issues, especially in enforcing the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And they have some very important activities, like this photo here I show of Canada's naval ships, the HMCS Regina, and this one here is the HMCS Ottawa, which have transited the Taiwan Straits twice in 2019, saying that was, of course, the easiest way from them to get from Southeast Asia to the Korean Peninsula. Canada does some trade through the South China Sea. About 2.67% of our trades in goods go through that place. But anyway, Taiwan is very important. It's important to maintaining the openness of the South China Sea, particularly because Taiping Island is there. That belongs to Taiwan. The South China Sea is very interesting. Taiwan and Japan have some overlapping claims, but they've managed to sit down, set aside sovereignty issues, and come up with some pragmatic cooperation on fishing. So I think that's a good model for what can be done elsewhere. And then, of course, there's Taiwan itself, which is situated in a place where it controls the Taiwan Strait and keeps the Taiwan Strait as international waters. I have an article about that, which you can get through that link that I just showed. I think that in terms of social issues, there are many social issues that unite Canada and Taiwan. First of all, the most obvious one is that we're all faced with a global pandemic of COVID-19, Wuhan 肺炎. And Taiwan has done a very good job, less than 500 cases confirmed so far, whereas Canada has much more than that, and I think 120,000, something like that. So we have a lot to learn from Taiwan on that, and I've written about that recently and been interviewed by the Globe and Mail about that. So we can do some cooperation on that. Even as we look beyond the pandemic, I think that there are lots of issues that require global cooperation, such as climate change and biodiversity. And I would love to see some collaboration between Taiwan and Canada on that kind of scientific research. Maybe even on Taiping Island, which would help Taiwan in its claims in the South China Sea. We also have some common interests in such issues as indigenous rights, which is my own field of study, and such things as how to manage the question of keeping an economy running and taking care of our people as society ages. These are just examples of some of the areas where the government can support scientific research collaboration between Canada and Taiwan. So basically, just for today, I want to summarize at the end by thinking through what can we do as citizens of Canada. To begin with, I think that no matter what you do for a living, no matter what job you do, what field you work in, I think you can probably find a way to make Taiwan a part of it. As an educator, I'm very busy with this. I teach about Taiwan. I write about Taiwan. I incorporate Taiwan into nearly all of my classes. I take students to Taiwan. I've done that 3 times. I've created a research chair in Taiwan studies at the University of Ottawa. Probably our close relationships with Taiwan is what's kept the Confucius Institute out of the University of Ottawa. I think that business relations are very important, and I know that some people involved in the Taiwan Tongxianghui are in business. And so I really would encourage you to bring Taiwan into your business as much as possible. Get goods from Taiwanese suppliers, sell to Taiwan if you export. But whatever you do, try to make your business related to Taiwan. This brings us to some certain issues that can help business people do that. Canada is a founding member of the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. I think that we can take an active role in inviting Taiwan to join us. I think that the two countries can also sign a Foreign Investment Protection Act, or FIPA, because that would protect Canadian investors in Taiwan as well as Taiwanese investors in Canada. The goal of doing all of this is that we should really be trying to connect our economies as much as possible. Now, many of our members of the Tongxianghui are retired. Some people have jobs that really are not, where it's really not possible to make Taiwan part of our work. But even if that's the case, we can all educate ourselves about the issues, and you can all share what you've learned about Taiwan in your own circles. You should be sharing things on Facebook and on Twitter or whatever platforms you use for social media. I think it's important to make our opinions known to businesses and others that deal with Taiwan and sometimes make mistakes. Like a few years ago when Air Canada was under Chinese pressure and they changed their drop-down menu so that instead of saying Taipei, Taiwan, it now has to say Taipei, China. And that, of course, is a mistake. When that happened, I wrote a letter to the CEO of Air Canada, who happens also to be the Chancellor of the University of Ottawa. I never got an answer, never expected an answer. But the more people can express opinions to these people, the better, because they will know that we have opinions. I would also encourage everybody to do your best to write op-eds to share in the newspapers. You can Google me and find out that I've been doing this for the Globe and Mail and the National Post. If you aren't writing such long op-eds, you can always write a smaller letter to the editor. In fact, it's very useful when there's an op-ed that somebody else writes a letter to the editor saying that they support the article and the ideas that are in it. If somebody writes an article which is not friendly to Taiwan in the newspaper, you can also respond to that. The Chinese ambassador is always writing things, it seems, and we should be replying to that. Also, I think you should be signing petitions. So like Michael Stanton's petition on getting a stamp in commemoration of McKay, for example, is a very good petition for us to be signing right now. I think that it's very important for us all to get to know our political representatives. Get to know your MP. The best time for that, of course, is during the elections, because you can get involved in the political campaigns, you can go to events, you can pay to go to a dinner and meet people. But it's important to talk to the MPs and let them know that there are Taiwanese Canadians who vote in the elections, but also there are many Canadians of all kinds of origins who support Taiwan because of the common values we share of democracy and freedom. We want to get that message across to the MPs. If you need to know how to communicate with your MP and write letters, write emails, and so forth, you can look at the website openparliament.ca, and that lets you actually look by your postal code, and then you can find out how to contact your MP, and you can learn what jobs they have in Parliament. I think that it's really important for us to reach out in all of these ways. And finally, I think that there's the point that it's not just about Taiwan. China is a threat. Communist China is a threat. And in fact, they have already spread their tentacles into Canada and other societies in ways that can really limit our freedom of speech here. If China someday were ever to take over Taiwan, it would just be the first step. Okinawa would be in danger, and maybe even further out to places like Palau and Guam. And China would have a much greater role to play in the world. I think that it would be a step towards the end of democracy and freedom as we know it. So it's not about Taiwan. It's about keeping the world free. It's about creating the kind of world that we want to live in, the kind of world that we want to pass down to our children and grandchildren. So I really encourage everybody, whether they're from Taiwan or not, to support Taiwan and its democracy. So I hope we can all get out and communicate with members of our society here in Canada, communicate with our decision makers, and make a difference by supporting Taiwan, because Taiwan makes a difference in the world. Thank you. 谢谢大家。大家得下